Yat Abine. Good morning, my relatives. It's Mark Charles. It's been 2 weeks since I've done a second cup of coffee. Been traveling a lot this past several weeks, and I was not able to get it into my schedule while I was on the road. But I'm sitting down this morning. It's Wednesday, November 22nd. I'm here with my cup of coffee. I just returned about a day and a half ago from about a 10-week trip, and I'm very grateful to be back with my family. Also grateful to be back at home and able to keep a more normal schedule for a little while. But let me begin as I always do, which is acknowledge I'm speaking to you from Piscataway lands. I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank them for the stewardship of these lands and just state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. I'm wearing my wonderful shirt on Learn, because at the end of this podcast this video will be talking about Thanksgiving and a little bit about some thoughts regarding the holiday that most of the nation will be celebrating tomorrow. But first, I just wanted to give you an update on kind of what I've been doing these past few weeks and how things have been going. I'm really wrapping up my 2023 travel and my 2023 speaking schedule. I have one more event coming up, which I'll talk about a little bit later, in New York City next weekend. But this last trip was kind of my last biggest push. And I was in Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. I was at the Fort Belknap reservation up in northern Montana. And I was in McFarland, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Madison, and had events going on all those places, and each of them were really great and really unique. The event at Belmont, or not Belmont, sorry, the event at Samford University was a lot of fun. It was a fairly conservative university, mostly Southern Baptists, I think, and a lot of conservative students there. A lot of the faculty are really kind of trying to push some things, but the student base is still fairly conservative. And I did several talks there. I did a talk specifically on the doctrine of discovery. I also did a convo, which is kind of like a mandated chapel. The students have to attend a certain number of those every year, and I did one in the evening there, and that was my most attended event. It was in a coffee shop, had, I would guess, 150 maybe or so people, 100, 150 people there, all students. And then I had another session the next day. It was kind of a lunch and learn where I talked specifically about Abraham Lincoln. All three of those went really well. I felt the best about, I really enjoyed doing the convo. It was the least of the planned events. I didn't have it scripted out. I knew I wanted to talk with the students more directly about my personal faith journey and about how I had been wrestling with following Jesus and what that meant in my faith, and in my walk the past 25, 30 years. And so I really enjoyed that. I'm hoping I'll be able to share that, if nowhere else, at least on my Patreon in the next few weeks. But yeah, I really enjoyed that event there, and that was a lot of fun to have that conversation there and to engage with the students as well as to engage with the faculty. Then I flew from Birmingham to Denver, and I spent the night in Denver, and then flew from Denver the next day up into Bozeman. I spent the night in Denver because it was almost impossible to find a flight. There's almost no direct flights into Bozeman, from most places around the country, or into any, even Billings or other airports in Montana. So you always have to connect somewhere. And so I was able to get a direct flight, or get a flight from Birmingham to Denver, spent the night in Denver, and then early the next morning flew directly into Bozeman, rented a car, and then drove 4.5 hours north up to Havre and Harlem, Montana, where I spoke for the next 2 days. The event at Fort Belknap, I'm really, so I was there with first of all, I want to show you some of these pictures because it was a gorgeous drive, and just driving up there, I kind of zoomed in on this picture a few times, but this is right, driving through the freeways, or the roads north, going out of Bozeman up towards Havre. I took that shot, got a little closer, zoomed in a little bit more, and then got right in here, and just incredibly gorgeous scenery. While I was there, winter struck. They had a snowfall the second night, or the first night I was there, and it just was a beautiful place and morning. And then the gentleman who hosted me, he goes by Snuffy, and he is a wonderful man. Invited me out, has worked extensively with me. He heard me first when I was running for president in 2020. He heard me first speak at the Native Forum in Iowa, in Sioux City, Iowa, and really wanted to get me out to talk to his community up in Fort Belknap. And so worked with me. I actually was there about a month and a half ago, early, doing some stuff in some of the schools. And then I went back this time to talk more directly to the community. We had 2 events, and unfortunately they weren't the best attended. There might have been a little problem with some of the promotion, might have been stuff going on in the schedule around the community. So they were not largely attended. But the first event, the first night, when I was there, we actually were able to live stream the event on YouTube, or not on YouTube, on Facebook. And I'm going to put that into the chat here so that you can check it out if you would like to. But this is the recording. We got a fairly good recording. This is on for Belknap's Facebook page. They got a fairly good recording on there, and that was really good. That recording has been watched numerous times, and I think a lot of members of the community who were not able to join that night were able to watch it online later. And that was really a good thing, because both that first night and the second night I was there, unfortunately, we did not have very large audiences for the events. I spoke. The title of each of the events was "The Doctrine of Discovery, Abraham Lincoln, and Thanksgiving," and it was a lot of fun. I'm looking at seeing who is online. Mr. Phil Fox, yeah, David. Oh, did I say 10 weeks? Oop, yes, it was not a 10-week trip. It was a 10-day trip. Thank you for correcting me there. Susan Yate, thanks for joining today. Cedar Trees and Fervor Dreams, Yate, I'm not sure who you are, but thanks for joining today. It's good to have you all here. Anyway, so that was my event up in Fort Belknap, and then I drove back down to Bozeman, and again, just beautiful scenery along the way. As I showed earlier, some of those pictures, even had to stop a few times just to soak it in. And then I flew to Madison. I flew to Milwaukee, and I was in Madison, Wisconsin for 3 days. And we did 3 events. On Saturday night, we did an event, a community event, which had a fairly good turnout. We had about 70 people show up. Then I preached at a church in McFarland on Sunday morning. And then on Monday morning, I spoke at a local high school, a public high school. And all of those events went really well. I was really impressed by how everyone was really open to engaging with the Doctrine of Discovery. I gave a very similar talk, right? Thanksgiving, Abraham Lincoln, and the Doctrine of Discovery. I went through the Lincoln content numerous times, and I was especially encouraged by the audience on Saturday night, which was predominantly white. Obviously, we're in Madison, we're in the Midwest, and but they were really appreciative to hear the message I gave them, especially the way I laid things out about who Abraham Lincoln was, and really caused them to wrestle with, what does it mean that as a nation, we hold this man up as one of our greatest heroes, right? And so that really led to some deep wrestling, had some great conversations. A lot of people purchased my books and were able to wrestle with those as well. So yeah, it was a really good time. And then that conversation kind of continued on Sunday when I preached on Mark 6 and the dynamics of power and authority. And then on Monday, it was a bit of a separate event where I was mostly engaging with students. There was about a 50-people class. The teacher there, Brian, who brought me in, is doing an incredible job of teaching his class about Native American issues and about the Doctrine of Discovery. And so my presentation fit right in with where they were. And I'm really relishing the opportunity to talk to younger people. As you know, a few months ago, I was in Atlanta talking to third graders, which was an amazing experience. And then this week, I spoke to high schoolers, and educating people at that age is just so much easier than re-educating people in their adult and later adult years. Not that it can't be done, but just by giving them this proper history early on, really is very helpful to move the conversation forward. So all of those events, I was very pleased with them, but I was pretty tired when I got home. And I got home on Monday evening and kind of collapsed yesterday. I had a few meetings. It was rainy most of the day, so I couldn't even go out. And I just kind of spent time with my family and rested here while I was back in getting back into DC. Obviously, while I was traveling, right, there's tons of things going on with politics, with the wars, with other issues that are being highlighted, and I don't have time to go into all of those. But I am over this next week. I still intend to watch the most recent GOP presidential debate, primary debate, and offer some thoughts on some of the questions and the comments that were going on in that debate. Obviously, the war between Israel and Hamas is ongoing. And I got several questions about that while I was out traveling. And there was especially it was Saturday night when I was in Madison, Wisconsin, McFarland, Wisconsin, and someone asked about what was going on in Gaza, and how I would frame that. And I gave a response. It was a bit shorter. I didn't have a lot of time, but I gave a response basically highlighting what I talked about on my second cup of coffee a few weeks ago when I spoke about that here. And I'm going to share that again here into the chat. It was my second cup of coffee 2 weeks ago. The title of that one was Israel, Hamas, USA, and the God of Abraham, an Indigenous perspective on the Israel-Hamas war. And again, what I pointed out, I said this in McFarland, and I pointed this out in the thing, where so much of the conflict in the Middle East is between various nations coming from three primary religions, right? We have the United States and much of Europe, which is rooted in Christianity. We have Israel, which is rooted in Judaism, and we have Hamas or other nations which are rooted in Islam. And what I pointed out in that second cup of coffee is we talk so much about the differences between these three groups and these three religions, but we don't spend enough time talking about what's similar to them. So looking at Israel, Hamas, and the USA, right, all three of these nations, which are the ones engaged in this conflict right now, all of these nations have nationalized their religion in some both formal and informal ways, right? Israel with Judaism, Hamas with Islam, and the United States of America with Christianity. We've all nationalized our religions. And all of these religions, all three of these religions, are Abrahamic religions, right? They're all rooted in the God of Abraham. And when you read the Torah, and all three of these religions except the Torah, the first 5 books of the Christian Bible or of the Old Testament, right? They accept these as this is scripture. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And in these books, right, we see a transformation of creator going from creator to becoming known as the God of Abraham, to becoming known as the God of Israel, to eventually in 1 Samuel, we see the God of Israel identifying as king. And as we see this progression of the identity moving further away from creator and more towards God of Israel and king, we see an increase in incredible violence, abuse, and even genocide, starting with the flood, which creator did to destroy creation, going on to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, going on to the God testing Abraham by asking if he was willing to kill his son, going to on Mount Sinai when the people worshipped a golden calf and God says, I'm going to kill everybody, and then going to the promised land narrative, which is now I want you to kill everybody. And all three of these religions use these stories to help define the divine in the scriptures. And all three of these nations, Israel, Hamas, and the United States, have nationalized their religions and used their religions to justify extreme violence against their opponents, the other. And so rather than discussing how these religions are all different and their conflict, let's talk about the way they're all the same. And they're rooted in these same ideas. And maybe that's the problem, is they all have this notion that their flavor of their God of Abraham is the right one, and they're using this narrative of violence and abuse to now nationalize this religion and then justify their extreme acts of violence, even against one another. So anyway, I laid that out, and in Wisconsin and a few other places along the trip, and it really, people seem to really appreciate that perspective. And I offer it as an Indigenous man, right? Someone who, yes, I've been a Christian all of my life, but I've also invested a lot in understanding who is creator, who is God, how do I relate to God through the traditions of my people. Primarily, one of the ways I've done it is through watching the sunrise. And so as someone who knows creator outside of what's defined in a book, I've been able to look at how the book defines creator and builds this progression from creator to king, and how the violence follows that progression. I'm like, yeah, there's something we have to talk about here. There's something that doesn't match up. You're no longer defining a creator. You're defining a king. You're defining an emperor. You're defining a political leader, not a creator. And so anyway, so I welcome you to go back and listen to that second cup of coffee and kind of catch up on some of the stuff I offered there. But anyway, so that was really good. I really enjoyed that dialogue. Actually, that second cup of coffee is doing fairly well. It's one of my more popular second cups of coffee, even in the past 9 to 12 months. And it's getting a lot of good comments and feedback going on. And I've really enjoyed that. So anyway, that's one of the things. Sorry, that menu came on my screen there for a moment. But I want to talk for a second about just my plans for 2024 as I'm kind of coming to an end of 2023. One of the things I really enjoyed is on this trip, I had about 20 hours in the car, both in Madison or in Montana and in Wisconsin. My son lives in Iowa. And when I looked on the map, we were only 3 hours apart when I was in Madison. And so Sunday, after I preached and finished my work at the church that day, I didn't have anything until Monday morning. And my son was 3 hours south of me. And so found out if he drove an hour and a half north and I drove an hour and a half south, we were right near Dubuque, Iowa, and we could meet there for dinner. So I drove down to Dubuque and had a great dinner with my son. It was a lot of fun to get to see him and to hang out. We're actually going to go see him later this week and spend some time as a family there. But yeah, it was fun just to be able to see him and spend some time with him. But I've had about 20 hours of driving in the past week and a half to really ponder some stuff. I've listened to a ton of audiobooks, and I've just been thinking about this past year and my next year and what I want to do kind of moving forward. And I want to share just a few thoughts with you. So one of the things that I've really been wrestling with in my work is I did an average of about 55 events this past year. Some of them smaller consulting things, others of them large public events, many of them virtual, a lot of them in person. I was doing an average of one event a week for the past year. And most of these events were by invitation, which is how most of my speaking schedule works, right? People hear who I am, they invite me to come and speak to their group. And while I really like this and I appreciate that, it doesn't give me a lot of control over where I go and who I talk to. And my speaking is actually one of the bulk of my income. And so in order to feed my family and to pay my bills, right, I need to accept all the invitations that I get. And I don't regret this, but it means I don't have a lot of control over where I go when I speak and who I talk to. And so I'm that's been something I've been noticing as I've been thinking about my schedule and what I want to do to kind of grow my platform and be more intentional with where I bring this message. And so in 2024, I want to look at how can I, on top of my speaking and the invitations I get, take more control over when I speak, where I speak, and who I speak to. And there's two things I'm going to try and do, right? I've talked about this thing I'm doing with my Lincoln event where I'm planning this 75-minute presentation specifically on Lincoln, and I'm going to start taking it around the country, almost like a tour. And the first several months of 2024, I'm going to take it to audiences that are more closed, and I'm going to be testing this material and try to really refine it and get it down to where it's really kind of solid. And then the second half of 2024, I'm going to take it much more public and really just who can I draw in to have this discussion, not just about who Lincoln really was, but about what does it say about us as a nation that we celebrate him as our greatest leader. And so that's one way I'm trying to take a bit more control over where I speak, when I speak, and who I speak to. The other thing I'm going to try and do is to really be more intentional about my online platform. My second cups of coffee, doing things on my YouTube channel, my social media, and my Patreon. And so to do that, I need to find a way to bring in some income from my online platform. And I've resisted up to this point monetizing my online platform. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll notice if you go back and watch videos, occasionally you'll see advertisements on some of my YouTube videos. That's not because I've monetized them. I'm not getting paid for those advertisements. It's just because YouTube has the right to monetize my videos. And so they do that. I don't get any money from that. And I've debated, do I want to do that this next year? But again, when I start accepting money from advertisers for my content, that begins to give them some amount of influence over what I do and do not say. And it just opens the door to my content being influenced, if not even directed, by the people who are advertising on my channel, even indirectly. And I don't want to do that. I've worked very hard over the past 20, 25 years of my life to diversify my income, to make sure that the people who pay me have very little control over my larger message and what I'm doing and the work that I'm trying to accomplish. And so, yeah, I work very hard to diversify my income so that I can talk as honestly and as truthfully as I possibly can. And so the thought of giving that type of influence to advertisers who have a very different agenda than I have, I'm not excited about that. So that brings me to my Patreon. And one of the things I'm going to try and do this next year is to really kind of up my game on Patreon, to increase my subscribership there, and to really use that as a place where I bring the conversation even deeper. And so I'm working on how can I refine the tiers I have on Patreon? How can I promote it better? How can I use that for the tool I think it is, where for a subscription, people can come in and really engage in this dialogue deeper, but also so people have a way to support my work and to help me, put food on the table, to pay my bills, as well as to grow and expand this work through the income I'm able to make, and without forcing you to watch advertisements. And just creating more consumers out of people. And so I'm going to be focusing this next year a lot more on my Patreon. And so if you are interested in learning about my Patreon or following it more, I'm going to put the link into the chat right now where you can engage with me on Patreon. I have several tiers there. I have my supporters tier. I have the ask questions tier. I have the join the conversation tier, and I have my decolonizing faith tier, as well as a few others. But those are the primary ones, and they're all great ways. Those range from $5 a month to $35 a month. And even if you just want to join you're like, hey, I would love to support you for a month, and just join for a month, right? The great thing about joining even for a month is if you join, you get to binge everything that's on that tier for not just for that month, but for the past 2 years that I've been on Patreon. And so there's a lot of content up there. There's book studies I've done with my co-author, Soong-Chan Rah. There's content about my upcoming book, Decolonizing Faith. There's lectures I've given. There's Q&As I've done, right? There's a lot of content out there. And so it really is a great way, even if you just want to join for a month, it's a great way to support me financially, make sure I don't, to help me keep my value for not giving advertisers influence over my message, as well as just binge, a lot of content in a short period of time. So, and most everything is available both as an audio and as a video file. So you can download the audio and listen to it on your phone as you're driving or running or doing errands or chores around the house, whatever you'd like. So anyway, it's a great way, and I'm going to work hard this next year to really kind of increase that. The other thing I'm going to work hard to do is continue to promote my book, Unselling Truths. Not just having people be aware of the book, but really to increase sales on my online platform, especially my 10-book special. I am loving these 10-book specials where people can buy 10 signed copies of my book through the end of November. You get free shipping. I'll ship them to a single address. And if you buy the book study special, you'll get 10 signed copies of the book. And then over the next year, you will have the opportunity to schedule a virtual Q&A with me in your book study. And we'll do a 45-minute Q&A, and I'll answer questions from your book study about the work that I'm doing and about the book. So that's another great way, and I'm really looking forward to kind of doing that. I also just wanted to update. So those are some things I'm thinking about in 2024. The other thing I'm really going to work on is I'm working on my book, Decolonizing Faith. I want to get that written and submitted to my publisher by the end of this next year. And one of the things I also want to do this next year is I want to increase my blogging. If you follow me online, you know I've been blogging for almost 20 years. And over those 20 years, I've wrestled with different holidays like the 4th of July and Thanksgiving and Columbus Day. And if you read the progression of my blogging, you'll see how I've gotten, I've wrestled with it deeper and deeper and deeper. And I haven't blogged about these holidays in the past 3 or 4 years, as I kind of came to some conclusions a few years ago and kind of left it there. And in 2024, I think I'm going to try to write a blog about many of the major holidays again: Thanksgiving, 4th of July, Columbus Day, maybe President's Day, as well as a lot of the massacre anniversaries like Sand Creek and Wounded Knee and the Dakota 38 and things like that. And I'm going to try and update my blogging so I can really wrestle with this and make sure people have some of my latest thinking on these things. And that's going to be one of my goals through 2024. This next week, I have 2 more events coming up. I'm going to be at the Riverside Church in New York City. And this is on Sunday, November 26th at 11 a.m. I will be preaching in the service, and my sermon is on radical inclusivity. And I will be there at 11 a.m. This Sunday, November 26th. And then right after that, I will be doing a lunch and learn in the afternoon. I believe that's at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. I'll be talking about the Doctrine of Discovery. And these events are both open to the public, and the service will be online. So you can follow online, or you can come and join in person if you're in or around New York City. But I will be there this Sunday, November 26th. And this will be my last kind of public event that I have scheduled right now for 2023. So I'm very excited about that event. I have not been to the Riverside Church before to speak, and I'm really looking forward to the honor of speaking at that church this coming Sunday. Now, some of the last question I want to wrestle with, right? It's Thanksgiving. What about Thanksgiving? What do we do with this holiday? A year ago, I did a YouTube video where I talked about Thanksgiving, and the title of the video was "Why I No Longer Celebrate Thanksgiving, and Neither Should You." I'm going to put that up there. I just put that into the chat. I've been wrestling with Thanksgiving for a number of years as I've learned more of the history, understood more of what's behind the holiday, and for a lot of years I was really trying to reclaim it, right? How can you pass up an opportunity to give thanks? Right? How isn't this a good spiritual discipline of recognizing the gifts we've been given and giving thanks for them? And absolutely, that is a fantastic, both spiritual as well as psychological and just human level discipline to give thanks on a regular basis. But as I've learned more and more about Thanksgiving, from how it started in 1621 to how Abraham Lincoln brought it into the modern era to how it's used today, recognizing that Thanksgiving was born and even to this day is about the celebration of the genocide of Native peoples and the fruits this nation gained from those violent deaths and depopulation. And I concluded a year ago, I'm publicly like, yes, I am done celebrating Thanksgiving. And I'm now advocating that we should not celebrate this holiday as a nation anymore. Now, I'm not trying to guilt people overnight, right? I went through probably a 10 to 15 year progression of really wrestling with this. And it took me a while to come to the conclusions that I've come to. So I want to share with you just a few of my articles that I've written and the videos that I've done. So here's one of the first ones that I wrote, at least that I could find on my blog. It was back in 2015. I wrote about the myth of Thanksgiving and racial conciliation. And then in 2018, I wrote, this was published both on my blog and on Indian Z. From now on, it's a day of mourning for Native peoples. This was in 2018 where I really wrestled with it there. In 2020, when I was running for president, I did a 2-part video series, and I talked about Thanksgiving and my journey to decolonize Thanksgiving. And I'm going to share both of those videos here right now into the chat. Then in 2022, I did a podcast kind of concluding with a YouTube video that I started with, which is why Thanksgiving is now a day of mourning. And all the stuff with that. And so let me share that one with you here too. Why no longer celebrate Thanksgiving? Here we go. And that was the podcast that I did. So yeah, there's a lot of content up there. The end result is I no longer celebrate Thanksgiving. I can't do it. It was rooted in the death and genocide of Native peoples. It was brought into the modern era by Abraham Lincoln through the death and genocide of Native peoples. And even in the modern era, when we look at other things we do around this holiday, it's rooted in the celebration, implicitly, if not explicitly, about the death and genocide of Native peoples. And we need to wrestle with that. And so again, I'm understanding people are on the spectrum of how to respond to this. It took me over a decade to get to the point where I say I can no longer celebrate this holiday. But I want to try to get my nation on that journey. The video, the first video I shared, the YouTube video of why I no longer celebrate Thanksgiving and neither should you. I put that on last year, and over the past year, I had about 3,000 views of it on my YouTube channel. And over the past month, I've had another 3,000 plus views on that video. And I've just been watching it, and there's dozens of comments being left daily, even hourly on that video as people are really engaging with this. Some more snidely and just dismissing me, and others really wrestling with it at a deep level. And so I welcome you to go back and watch that video on my YouTube channel. Again, I'll put it right here at the top of this again. And it's why I no longer celebrate Thanksgiving, and neither should you. But that's where I've landed. And so like I said earlier, my birthday is always around Thanksgiving. So we usually do a celebration around the same time. We absolutely take the time off work that everybody gets, but we don't do a turkey dinner on Thanksgiving. And so even this week, we're traveling to see my son, and we're traveling on Thanksgiving because there's no one traveling that day. And so it's actually pretty cheap. And so we'll be traveling on Thanksgiving. And then we'll be in Iowa with my son and celebrate my birthday there over the weekend. And then I travel to New York City to preach on Sunday morning. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Thanksgiving is one where I've just come to the conclusion we cannot reclaim this. We have to acknowledge it was birthed for what it was birthed for, and we have to say, yeah, we don't want to partake in that anymore. But it's going to take a while to get that education out there. So I will continue to educate. I will continue to encourage people to move away from it. But I'm now much more bold about that, of saying, yeah, not only am I not celebrating it, but I don't think this is a holiday we as a nation should celebrate anymore either. Anyway, I hope these things are helpful, my relatives. I thank you for joining me for my second cup of coffee. I hope your cup is as good as mine is. Thank you for this journey we're all on together to unlearn and to learn for the first time this common memory. I hope you have a great day, my relatives. Walk in beauty, and may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Ahihat and Hakonet.